Welcome. Thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind giving us a like, and consider going ahead and subscribing as well, that would be fantastic. And if you really want to go the extra mile, go down to the description below and click the Patreon link. Lots of cool stuff going on there. As always, I love you, and enjoy the show, guys.
The DeathWorlders, a story by user Hambone. Chapter 22, Warhorse, Part 1, First Year, Part 3. Date point, 5 years, 2 months, and 4 weeks after Vancouver. Hey Ava, I've only got 3 words to say about Indoc so far. Holy fucking shit. This is really bringing me back down to earth. I'm going to get through it, though, no matter what. Thinking of you. Adam. Date point, 5 years and 4 months after Vancouver. Hey, Ava. I'm sorry I've not written you since last week. I did get your letter, and I hope you know, I'd have written back if I could. I've just been too thrashed to even pick up a pen. Really, the PT here is that hard. I'm talking 20 solid hours of calisthenics, when they're feeling kind. I swear I'm not exaggerating. Getting a reward today, though. A good long letter session, a whole hour. Everyone else is calling home or whatever, but for me, wow, just getting some quiet time to sit and think and write to you is like, I never imagined I'd think something so simple was such a big deal. I spent half of it just sitting and thinking and getting my head sorted out. You know, I said in one of my letters from Basic that I kind of enjoy being shouted at now. Well, that's still true. It's hard to explain, but if I'm being shouted at, then it's kind of a compliment because the MTL knows I can do better and he's telling me so. I mean, actual words of encouragement are nice too, don't get me wrong, but I can see now that it wouldn't get anybody through this. They're training us for the very worst, you know? They want to be able to send us into anything and have us be strong enough that if we fail, it was never possible in the first place. And there's no way to do that except the way they do it. They've been doing it for years. They know what they're doing here, and I know that I can make it through this. So yeah, I hurt basically all the time, I'm tired basically all the time. I'm so wired that just getting a whole hour of quiet time feels like the biggest luxury in the world. But don't be sad for me, baby, because underneath it all, I think I'm actually kind of enjoying myself. If that sounds weird, maybe it is, I don't know. I still struggle to eat enough. They're giving me like 10,000 calories a day or something insane like that. That's a heck of a lot of food. With me not being a big guy some days, it's almost harder to get all of that food to fit in my belly than it is to do the actual PT. It'd help if it was Dad's waffles or something. A taste of home, you know? I don't care how full I am. If I had a plate of those right now, they'd be gone. I know they were store-bought ones, but it still counts as home cooking, right? I love you. I miss you every day, and I think the reason is that for all the really big shit that's happened in the last few years, you've been there through it all. The hardest part by a mile has been learning how to go through something this huge without you. I'm kinda sorry for that. Date point, 5 years, 4 months, and 2 days after Vancouver. Airman Aries! Mail call had become the best part of Adam's day, enough so to shake the ache right out of his abused muscles.
Dear Adam, baby, you're not going through this without me. I read all your letters, and I write you back every time, but it's not just that. I may not be there with you doing the PT or whatever, but I pray for you every day. I think of you every minute. And knowing you're thinking of me, even with what you're going through, is what helps me, too. You've been there for me through all the really big shit of the last few years, too. You know that. I feel lonely a lot. No you, no Sarah, no Haley. I love...
Here Ava had written the word your and then scribbled over it.
Dad, but you can't have a social life of just one person. I guess we're both learning how to cope with just being there for each other in spirit rather than in person, huh? But believe me, Corazon, that's all we need. I'm so proud of you.
Ava.
Heart.
Adam was smiling as he folded the letter up. Good letter.
She ain't here, bro. You're talking to yourself again. Baseball grinned at him.
Beats your company, Adam retorted, grinning back.
Only company your midget ass gets is my belt buckle anyway, so that ain't that surprising.
Hey, that was almost witty. Must be because you sat down. I know your brain doesn't get enough oxygen at 10,000 fucking feet when you stand up. Burgess beamed and stuck out a fist. Motherfucker. Adam completed the fist pound. Asshole. They were interrupted by the MTL, who entered the barracks and announced a briefing and lecture in 10 minutes.
What now? Baseball wondered aloud.
They found out when they settled into their seats in the lecture hall 6 minutes later. There was the usual rigmarole of standing when the presenting officer, a lieutenant with the surname Reed on his chest, entered. "Be seated," he ordered, and 6 backsides met chairs. There was a minute or two of patient waiting while he entered his login and password and called up some files. "This is a confidential code word Sacred Stranger briefing. You will not share this material with anyone not possessing need to know for Sacred Stranger," Reed began. "Is that understood?" There was a chorus of, "Yes, sir." Good. Reed loaded up a presentation slide, and Adam groaned inwardly. Death by PowerPoint was a running military gag that he had so far been blessed to suffer only mildly from. He hoped that streak of good fortune would continue. 7 months ago, Reed stated, lingering on the first slide, the British Royal Navy's 2 captured and refitted alien starships engaged in a skirmish with the Hunter blockade around Cimbrian. They acquitted themselves well in the battle, which was fought to rescue the crew of a refugee freighter who had unwittingly blundered into the Hunter fleet. You should all be familiar with the Hunters. If anybody here requires a refresher, raise your hand. Nobody did. Reed gave a shallow, satisfied nod and continued. During the battle, a special boat service team led by one Captain Owen Powell boarded the freighter and extracted its surviving crew. The operation was a resounding success, but Captain Powell and the commanding officers of HMS Myrmidon and HMS Caledonia recommended to the Ministry of Defense that a review be conducted into the requirements and viability of a dedicated force of spaceborne special operators capable of extravehicular activity, or EVA. That review was shared with the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, and the result is that we are now founding an international joint unit, provisionally known as the Spaceborne Operators Regiment, or SOR. This is an initiative that's still in its infancy. No commanding officers, no operators, no gear, no crest or motto, nothing, he continued. Its mission, however, is already well understood. The SOR would serve to defend and protect the people and interests of Earth, Cimbrian, and any future colonies which may arise from extraterrestrial threats. It will conduct search and rescue of stations and starships that become adrift or damaged. Will provide humanitarian aid to castaways and those affected by disaster, and will be available to defend stations and large ships as much as is possible, from hunter strikes and piracy. These missions will also benefit the human race through propaganda, through the Divinian development credit bounties that are awarded for recovering life rafts, and by securing extraterrestrial technology from derelicts. He paused. I should note, gentlemen, that when I mention extraterrestrial threats, I refer to any and all enemies of our species, including the alien force responsible for the destruction of San Diego, the exact nature of which is deemed need to know. Adam and Burgess exchanged glances. Reed advanced the slideshow. It was now dominated by something that looked like a hybrid of a NASA spacesuit and an interceptor body armor system, though sleeker than either. The defining equipment of spaceborne operators will be their extravehicular military action spacesuit, or EV-MASS. This has been designed by private sector experts from the Hephaestus LLC on Ceres, who hold records for most and longest extravehicular activity, working along experts from CQC Limited, who produce the Osprey armor system. Now, you've all been given a brief introduction to the SOR concept. A full briefing of this system and its capabilities, variants, and requirements will be saved for those of you who choose to commit to joining the program. For now, the important point is this. The EV-MASS is a fully functioning spacesuit designed to allow the operator to engage the enemy in the vacuum of space and maneuver in zero gravity. That combined functionality means that it has a base weight of 103 pounds before gear and accessories. There was no breach of discipline as such, but all 6 of the PJ candidates exchanged glances. They were all strong enough to wear and use a suit that heavy, thanks to the intensive physical training of the pipeline, but doing so would suck. Remaining agile and mobile for prolonged periods under the combined weight of that suit and their bags, gun, equipment, and maybe even a patient, who might even be wearing the same suit and all of their gear, all added up to a daunting prospect. One of them put his hand up, and Reed pointed to him, inviting him to ask his question. "Sir, if a man wearing one of those has to carry one of his buddies, that's got to be, 600 pounds at least. Hell, it could be a lot more. How's anybody supposed to hump that kind of weight any kind of serious distance?" Reed acknowledged the question's validity with a nod. "It's a big ask," he agreed. "The suit does contain some passive load-bearing structures which will help, but the operators wearing it will need to be exceedingly strong. Which is why we're coming to you now with this." He closed the slideshow and opened a video. "This is footage of Lance Corporal Aaron Baxter, United States Marine Corps. Baxter was involved in a vehicular collision during a training exercise 2 weeks ago and suffered Reed checked his notes, pronouncing the medical terminology slowly and with care. "A posteriorly displaced, open comminuted intra-articular tibial plateau fracture with an intimal tear of the popliteal artery." He looked up. "As I understand it, that basically means the poor bastard's knee got flattened and everything broke into tiny little bits." Everyone grimaced. "Right. You understand," Reed noted, nodding. "This is a crippling injury. A career ender. That knee's never going to be the same again, and if he escapes amputation, getting it working again even half normally is going to involve probably a prosthetic joint, and certainly a lot of physiotherapy and rehab. Ordinarily, Baxter would be out of a job and living on his VA benefits and medical care. Fortunately for him, he came along at exactly the right moment to be the guinea pig for a new medicine purchased from extraterrestrial sources." While the footage of Baxter continued on one half of the screen, the other half began a quick animation detailing the origins and capabilities of the drug. "It's called Cruzier Derivative Compound, A, but for the purposes of command usage, we're calling it Cru-D. Don't ask me how, but it hugely accelerates and improves the healing process," Reed continued. "Baxter went under the knife to have all those little bitty bits put back together and the plumbing fixed, and while they were at it, he let them inject this stuff right in there." On the screen, Baxter's dressings were being removed. This is him only 30 hours after the operation. Notice, there's no surgical wound, nor a scar from the open fracture. That had closed up by the 6-hour mark, and if they'd put sutures in him, they'd have had to operate to get them back out again. Fortunately, they foresaw that and only clamped the wound and compressed it. But when they x-rayed the kneecap at 8 hours, they found out it was damn near perfectly intact. They kept him in bed for another day just to be sure, but... Baxter stood up, and jaws dropped around the room. "That's incredible," somebody muttered.
It's goddamn alien space magic is what it is, Baseball grunted. Reed nodded agreement, letting the interruption slide. And for the time being, it looks like we're stuck relying on the Cortai to make it for us. When our scientists tried to figure out how it works in the lab, they say the samples just dissolved into water and some weird organic molecules, like it's got a self-destruct built in. Corporal Baxter is fit and well and back with his unit, under observation for long-term side effects, but otherwise unscathed after what should have been the end of a promising career as a U.S. Marine. He turned off the screen. "So, what does this have to do with the 6 of you?" he asked rhetorically. "The short version is that with the physical demands of the SOR program being so high-end, we want to use this stuff therapeutically during the physical training. Slap patches, joint injections. You're all familiar with the theory behind muscle gains?" There was general nodding. "Good. But to spell it out for the sake of clarity, the very basic version is that the muscles and ligaments suffer minor damage and heal stronger than they were before. With this stuff," he continued, "we think we can take that process to a new level. Completely thrash the trainee during the day. Then they heal perfectly overnight thanks to a contact patch of Crew D. Throw in some of the latest developments in sports science, and we think it's possible to produce operators whose bodies exist on the absolute limit of what's humanly possible." One of the others put his hand up. "Begging your pardon, sir, but you want us to do that?" "I'm putting it out there for you to think about. Like I said, the SOR is still in its infancy. We've got all the necessary infrastructure in place. Now all that's needed are volunteers. Any such volunteers will be plucked from the pararescue pipeline and put onto the SOR highway instead. This will closely mirror and often take place alongside pararescue training, but will be even more physically intense, and then will be followed by SOR-specific training and possibly astronaut training as well. Any questions?" Several hands went up. Reed acknowledged one of them with a point of his pen. "Sir, what are the risks here?" "We're assured that, when used correctly, Crew D has no side effects. And to head off the next question, the only incorrect use we know of was a couple of cases where the original medicine, Cruzier, entered the patient's gut biome, where it was absorbed by intestinal bacteria which mutated and began to produce a constant supply." "What happens when that happens?" "According to the Cortai, the subject undergoes rapid muscle growth and increase in bone density and basically reaches their maximum physical potential without the need to exercise their way there, not to mention becoming permanently able to heal from even quite serious injuries at a remarkable rate. There's also some suggestion that they become biologically immortal and may experience improved skill learning and the tapping of latent genetic potential that exists inside the human genome, such as the ability to see some way into the infrared." There was silence. Then somebody else put their hand up. "Begging your pardon, sir, but why the hell aren't we going with that?" "One, because Crew D has been modified to preclude exactly that scenario because it scares the bejesus out of the Cortai. 2, because it seems to come at a serious cost to the subject's mental health," Reed explained. "The 2 known cases so far demonstrated reckless, self-destructive behavior and possible signs of a schizophrenic or dissociative identity disorder, respectively. Besides that," he continued, "we have no idea if that's just in the short term. The long-term effects of Crew D applied topically in a targeted and safe fashion, we are assured, are nil. Nothing is known about the long-term consequences of keeping the human body indefinitely soaked in the original Cruzier." He cleared his throat. "The only remaining thing that could be a risk factor would be nutrition. You'll be packing on muscle and bone mass at such an incredible rate that your diets will have to be strictly controlled down to the last milligram and calorie. Every snack, every meal. You won't even be able to grab a burger without planning and training ramp down, and if done incorrectly you might find yourself suffering from malnutrition. At the very least, it would be a wasted opportunity. At worst, well..." This was met with thoughtful silence. Reed let them mull it over for a moment, then spoke again. This is obviously an enormous decision. You would not be here if you were so impulsive as to just take it on immediate notice, which is why we've informed you today, so you can have your weekends to consider it. This briefing will continue on Monday at 1400 hours. Dismissed! You're going for it, ain't you? Adam looked up. He'd been considering how to write back to Ava, tell her that his training would go on for at least another 2 years beyond what they had discussed, without breaching confidentiality or classification. He knew she'd accept that he couldn't discuss such things with her, but she still deserved an explanation, and he was carefully assembling that explanation in his head. This is what I got in for, he said simply. I knew there had to be aliens involved somewhere, and yeah. Baseball sat down. You did? Dude, antimatter? Nobody on Earth's got that shit. We've got alien Healy juice, though. They didn't tell me about that shit when I first heard about the SOR. Adam nodded. Yeah, he said. That one's new on me, too. Man, I ain't sure about this Crew D stuff. Baseball rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I knew too many guys got roided up in school. You sure you're not rushing into this? These ain't roids. This shit heals you stronger, man. Yeah, but... Man, you trust anything E.T. makes? Adam sighed. I've been thinking about it for a long time, Base. The SOR is going to be going up against the group that killed my mom and my friends. That's why I joined in the first place. Because a group like that needs people fighting them, you know? I don't know if I trust E.T., but I sure as hell trust us, you know? So you're going for it, then? Yeah. Okay. I'm with you, Hoss. Adam paused. Base. Bro, you don't have to. Bullshit. We're a good team. You're the heavy-lifting motherfucker, I'm the brains of the outfit. Adam laughed and gave him the finger. Baseball laughed too, then reached out, flipped Adam's hand over, grabbed it in a knuckle-creaking handshake, and dragged him in for a solid masculine slam hug. Besides, we get to be fucking astronauts, he added. You know that's a ticket to pussy. Adam laughed again. All right, you sentimental fuck. You're with me. I appreciate it. You better. Hey, Ava. Baby, I'm sorry to do this to you, but there's a career opportunity come up that's perfect for me. It's everything I got into the military to accomplish. I wish I could discuss it with you, but it's all confidential. The downside is that the training is 2 years longer than we'd planned for, and it's going to be really hard to get the time to visit you during those 2 years. I wish there was time for us to talk about it properly, but they want my answer on whether or not I'm signing up for this on Monday. And there's just not time for me to get back, and with the emails only updating once a day, by the time your reply gets to me, it will be Monday anyways. So, I'm sorry, Ava, but this is too perfect to pass up. Write me back. I'll understand if you're mad. Adam. XXX. Date point. 5 years, 4 months, and 5 days after Vancouver. Folktha, Cimbrian. The Far Reaches. Jessica Olmsted. Oh my God! Ava! Jessica had never been the kind of teacher who believed in keeping an emotional distance from her students, and so when Ava shuffled into the classroom a quarter hour early and looking totally ruined, she dropped everything and dashed over to give the younger woman a hug. What happened? Ava ran a shaking hand through unbrushed, unwashed hair and lost whatever grip on her composure she'd had, burying herself in Jess's sweater and shaking fiercely. Jess held her until finally Ava managed to pull herself together and straightened up. What happened? I checked my emails, and there's one from Adam, and... Ava looked away and made an angered expression at herself, fighting to stay in control. He changed the plan. Changed the...
I don't understand. I was fine with him doing 2 years of pararescue training and some deployments, and I don't know. All that, we'd got it sorted out and I was fine with it. But now he's talking about 4 years of training and maybe not being able to see each other at all in those extra couple of years. And who knows how long after that.
Ava threw her hands up and engaged anger circuits that Jess had never seen in her before.
¿Qué se supone que haga? Él no me preguntó, él no me habla de él. El hijo de puta me acaba de enviar una carta de mierda. Y espera que yo sea bien. Eso pendejo desconsiderado. Eh?
Jess sat on a desk.
I don't speak Spanish, Ava,
she pointed out gently. But watch your language. The kids'll be here soon. Ava went still, then deflated and sat down, miserably.
It's not just his life,
she complained. Jess gave her a moment to be silent. When Ava wiped her eyes and began to sort herself out, she took the opportunity to be constructive.
What are you going to do?
She asked. Ava made a bitter little noise.
I should have learned this by now, shouldn't I? Don't plan for anything because tomorrow you might get nuked. So what I'm going to do is whatever seems like a good idea at the time,
Ava said.
So what seems like a good idea right now? Ha! Dumping his ass!
But Ava was shaking her head to indicate that she had nothing of the sort in mind.
But whatever, so he's been an insensitive jerk and made a huge decision without me. So what? At least he cares. He still loves me, and I love him too, even if he's been a huge jackass right now. So,
Jessica repeated.
So I guess what seems like a good idea is just forgive him and try to be happy.
Ava shrugged.
Be happy in the moment, right? That's what our gallons are so into, and I think I'd be unhappier without him.
She sighed and stretched.
What do you think?
Jess considered the question.
I guess my marriage broke up because we weren't able to forgive when we hurt each other.
She conceded in the end.
I don't know. There's so many arguments either way. I guess you do just have to go with whatever seems like a good idea at the time. Like he did. Like he did, Jess agreed. I think that's what love is understanding when one of you comes first. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's him.
She hesitated, then decided to put her money where her mouth was and say what seemed like a good idea at the time.
And, Ava, he's a soldier now. Soldiers, they don't always come back. I think you're going to need to get used to trying to live as well as you can in the moment and figure out how you're going to get by without him if that ever happens.
A banging in the hallways made them both look up. It was the clear sound of the class starting to arrive.
If you want to borrow a hairbrush, there's one in my office on the desk,
Jess offered. Ava smiled. It wasn't a strong smile, but it was genuine.
Thanks, Jess. Thank you.
Jess gave her another hug.
I hope I helped.
Ava nodded, then slipped out the other door a few seconds before the classes started to enter, in usual boisterous mode. Jess straightened and got herself back into teacher mode. The first and hopefully worst of the day's crises was dealt with.
Dear Mr. Aries, as I said to you when Ava first arrived at our school, she has always struck me as being much more intelligent than she believes herself to be. I am very pleased to tell you that over the last few months, she has vindicated my belief in her and excelled at her studies. As you know, the free-form approach to schooling that we use at this school does not allow me to break down her performance by subject, but she has achieved outstanding performance in every single module she has chosen to pursue. As the sole member of our senior group,
With the next students not due to enter that group for another 3 years, she does, however, pose a slight administrative problem for the school, which I believe would be best resolved by graduating her at the end of this coming summer term, and then taking her on over the coming school year as a teaching assistant. This will not only enable her to continue to study ahead of her university plans, but will give her some practical experience and income that will serve her in good stead. She has indicated to me that she wishes to attend the London School of Economics, to study for a career in photojournalism. Challenging though this choice of career will doubtless be, I have complete confidence that she will excel in it. Her combined overall grade for this semester is A. Yours sincerely, Dr. J.A.B. Olmsted Jr. and Senior Group's Tutor, Folktha Comprehensive School. Wow, that's, easily the best report card I ever had. Gabriel took off his reading glasses. Yeah? Ava sighed. Every other one I ever had always had the words "could do better" in it, she said. I guess they were right, huh? I guess they were, Gabriel agreed, though he left out his opinion that if her performance had previously been lackluster, then that probably reflected more on the education system than on Ava herself. You gonna go for it? She hesitated. Do you think I should? It sounds like an excellent opportunity, Gabriel told her. Experience, money, and education all in one go? Chances like that don't come along too often. True. Gabriel knew what the trepidation was about. Why not discuss it with Dr. Olmsted? He suggested. If you want plenty of time to get out there and practice your photography, maybe she can help. Ava nodded and pulled the camera out of her handbag. She was constantly fiddling with it nowadays, usually with a frown. I do need to practice more. I keep looking at Sarah's old pictures and seeing new things in them. Things she was doing that I didn't even know how to see before. She sighed. She was really talented, Gabe. I want to try and do justice to her. Try and bring back some of her spark. But I don't think I can. Even if you don't, Gabriel told her. In trying, you'll find your own talent. Don't think of it as bringing her spark back, but as, reincarnating it. Same spirit, but different, yeah? Maybe. She put the camera away, then stood up and kissed him on the forehead. I'd better get home, she said. See you tomorrow? Of course. Date point. 5 years, 5 months, and 1 week after Vancouver. Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas, USA, Earth. Adam Aries. Indoc had taught Adam a trick. It had taught him how to notice that he was exhausted and in pain, but to treat those facts as an abstract. It was a useful trick, one that kept his feet kicking hour upon hour upon hour in a pool of cold water, with his goggles flooded and his muscles saturated with lactic acid. The mind went to a quiet place without thought, where the absence of any stimulation but the physical exertion didn't matter, and where the exertion itself was not the immediate, intimate issue it might once have been, but was instead academic. It wasn't even tedious. His ego was so shut down as to not care that he received no real intellectual stimulation for hours. There was just the task. Keep kicking. In that mode, he might have gone on until his body finally gave out, and that, he suspected on those rare occasions where he was permitted to be lucid, was the point. Besides, pool days were comparatively gentle compared to the weight sessions. Those were the days when the Crew D came out in force, when muscles sprained and ligaments tore and were forced to mend almost on the spot. You worked until you broke, and were then fixed, and then, while you healed, you traded something else. If he hadn't learned how to notice his pain without experiencing it, he couldn't have borne it. There was just the task. Keep lifting. Keep kicking. Keep improving. He wasn't even waiting. He was just doing, until the whistle blow summoned him out of his trance and allowed him to stop doing again. Allowed him, once he was out of the pool, to become Adam again and realize just how trashed and tired he really was. Adam, who was packing on muscle at an incredible rate. He'd known that he would, of course. The SOR briefing had been clear on that. But it was still jarring sometimes to look at himself and recall that just 2 years ago he'd been a skinny teenager who didn't even fill out the small shirts in the store, whereas he now wore extra-large size shirts like a second skin. "Line up!" He met Baseball's eye as they lined up alongside the pararescue candidates. They stood out now, clearly on a different career path. The PJs were strong as hell, but Adam and Baseball were both much, much bigger. Their ability to wriggle into tight places had been sacrificed to prioritize the raw power they needed to remain mobile and active under crushingly heavy loads. Being lined up after an exercise was nothing new. It had hitherto been the prelude to another task. This time was different. This time the MTLs lined up in front of them, at attention, and Master Sergeant Allen, the team leader, stepped forward, studying them carefully. Devastated as they were by what must have been a truly epic session in the pool, every one of the airmen held at attention perfectly. Finally, he nodded. "Airmen," he said, "you have now completed the indoctrination section of your pararescue training. You have done something that is literally better than a 1 in a million event. Precious few men have ever accomplished this task. You're not pararescuemen yet, but as of today, you've proven that you are all worthy to follow in the green footsteps of the giants of your chosen unit. You have cleared the first and most difficult hurdle on the road to your maroon beret, and it has been our honor and privilege as your military training leaders to witness this feat." He saluted, as did all the other MTLs. The exhausted airmen returned a precision salute with equal snappy enthusiasm. "Congratulations." The salute was held for a moment, then relaxed, and the MTLs softened with it, advancing forward to exchange handshakes, hugs, and smiles with men they'd been yelling at only minutes before. Adam was running on fumes, but he joined in gladly. He'd known he could do it. Finally, the congratulations died down. Master Sergeant Allen finally called an end to it. "All right, get back to your dorms and get some sleep," he ordered. "And sleep in. Tomorrow is a Liberty Day. Get checked out, get laundry done. Don't you worry about your gear just this once, we'll take care of it. You've earned it." He paused, then smiled. "But don't get stupid," he added. "Training resumes the next day." Date point: 5 years, 9 months, and 3 weeks after Vancouver. Folk the Colony, Cimbrian, the Far Reaches. Gabriel Aries.
"Ah, I thought so."
Gabriel looked up from toying with his glass of water. The waiters of Folktha's first restaurant, and what a restaurant it was, had been discreetly keeping him supplied with water for a few minutes now. Ava had spent her first paycheck arranging for him and someone else to be among the place's first diners. He had to admit, he was intrigued. He hadn't been on a date in years, and never on a blind one. Though, like the woman who had just said, "I thought so," he'd had a sneaking suspicion he knew who it would be. "Wow," he commented. He'd been right, but he barely recognized her. Jess Olmsted giggled.
"That's a good start."
Gabriel stood and pulled back a seat for her. "Heartfelt," he promised, as she settled into it, carefully dropping her handbag beneath her. Whenever he'd interacted with Jess before, she'd been in teacher mode, favoring a black cardigan and a red scarf with a long skirt. Comfortable, sensible, and plain. For tonight she'd worn something substantially sleeker in dark blue, with a neckline that pulled at the eyes, punctuated by an attention-grabbing, slim little minimalist necklace and a smile that said, "Go ahead and look." Her hair was out of its usual loose ponytail and swept into something just a little bit more elaborate. Gabe had enough experience with women to know just how much time and agonizing would have gone into crafting such an apparently effortless appearance, and knew enough about perfume to sense that she was wearing an expensive one. Good signs, especially considering that she claimed to have suspected who her date was.
Ava's got to be so proud of herself right now playing matchmaker, he noted, sitting down again.
Well, I had my suspicions, Jess confessed. There aren't many other people she could have set me up on a date with.
Likewise.
And yet, here we are.
Here we are,
Gabe agreed, mirroring her smile and pleased that he'd put similar effort into his own appearance. Between getting the fit of his suit adjusted and treating himself to a wet shave, he'd even subtly dipped into Adam's left-behind stash of manscaping products, which had been a strange experience for him, being of a generation of men that didn't traditionally wear cosmetics of any kind. Ava had reassured him that the result was dashing and sophisticated, especially when coupled with his cane. The maitre d' spun by with the wine list and a recommendation, which they agreed to with nods and murmurs.
She was pretty thrilled with your recommendation, he revealed. So was I. I think it's exactly what she needs.
I hope so.
Jessica poured herself a small glass of water from the complimentary jug between them.
She's an amazing person, really. Her and your son both.
Don't I know it? Gabriel agreed. I don't think I'd be coping so well if I wasn't so proud of them both.
Yes, I heard Adam was an honor graduate.
I barely recognized him, Gabriel said. He walked differently. He looked around differently. He was so much more focused. He sighed. I guess the military suits him. On the one hand, I'm pleased, but on the other, he's signing up for a very dangerous life. After everything that's happened.
Jess leaned forward, unconsciously echoing his sigh.
Heaven help us if we ever get used to the idea of our kids doing dangerous work, she commented, and nodded along when he nodded.
See, he's his own man and Ava's her own woman. I just wish I knew how to make their lives happier.
Jess smiled.
Start by making your own life happier, she suggested.
Well, that's why I came down here, Gabriel said.
Jess smiled and sipped her water.
I'm glad to hear it.
You think it's that simple? Gabriel asked. That I'll help them by helping myself?
I do,
Jess nodded.
And they'll help you by helping themselves. It's plain how much the three of you love one another.
The wine arrived along with a couple of slim menus, which distracted them both for a few minutes as they mulled over their options and ordered.
Like you said, Gabe continued once their orders were placed. They're amazing people. With everything that's happened, they've only grown together and more mature.
What about you?
Jess asked. Gabe just shrugged a little.
A little weaker in some ways, a little stronger in others, he suggested. I'm ready to date again, for instance. That's a big step forward for me.
You still held a bit of a candle for your ex? I know it took me ages to get over my divorce.
No, I don't think that's it.
Gabe mulled it over.
I think I was more bruised and weary, if that makes sense.
I understand.
Jess nodded, fiddling with the stem of her glass and listening to him with her chin on her hand.
What about you? Does your ex-husband know you're living on an alien world nowadays?
Jess giggled.
My ex-wife and I haven't spoken in years, she said. I have no idea what she's doing with her life, and I haven't let her know what I'm doing with mine.
Gabriel cleared his throat.
Sorry.
Don't be, she reassured him. I only mention it when it's relevant, and it's only relevant with people who...
She just winked at him. Her nose wrinkled a little when she did so, and Gabriel practically fell in love on the spot. He raised his glass.
To a good first date,
he proposed. She raised her eyebrows, picking up the wine glass, but not yet meeting his toast.
First date?
First date,
he repeated, projecting as much confidence as he could muster. She smiled, causing her nose to wrinkle again, and her glass rang against his.
Is it the quality of the wine, do you think, or how much of it we had?
Gabriel laughed.
A little bit of column A and a little bit of column B,
he suggested. Neither of them were drunk as such, but they both definitely had a happy buzz on, warming and rounding off the night as he walked her home with an arm around her waist. She seemed very happy to be going at his slow, limping pace.
I think you're right. Oh, we're at my house already?
Gabriel studied it. Jess lived in the same kind of tiny chalet as had been given to Adam and Ava, like most of the colonists. He knew that Sir Jeremy was still handling the minutiae of bringing in contractors to establish more permanent and comfortable housing, but that project had only just begun.
"That's one of the perks of being Colonial Security Chief," he said. "My apartment's even bigger than the one I had back in San Diego."
Oh, really?
"Yep. Want to see?"
Jess laughed.
Oh, Gabe, she chided. I think we'd at least better have a couple more dates before you show me how big your,
she paused cheekily,
apartment is.
"Whenever you want, wherever you want," he replied.
Tuesday. Same place and time?
She suggested.
"Absolutely," he agreed.
Good, because I really enjoyed myself tonight.
He turned towards her, still with his arm on her waist.
"You want to round it off with a goodnight kiss?"
She did so. It was a good one, too. Several seconds of gentle, smiling lip contact with a hand on his cheek that promised better things to come, underlined by a second, shorter one, just after they separated. They didn't say anything else. She just trailed her hand in his as she let herself into her chalet, letting go only in time to blow him a kiss and close the door. Gabriel Aries walked home with the largest smile on his face that he'd worn in years. Date point: 5 years, 11 months, and 1 week after Vancouver. Folk the Colony, Cimbrian, the Far Reaches. Gabriel Aries. Rather than hobbling through the living room and opening the door, Gabriel was in the habit of shouting, "Come on in, Ava," when the doorbell rang. She was the only one who used it. Literally everyone else in the colony knocked. It was becoming one of those Cimbrian quirks, the sign of a local insofar as anybody could be local in a town so young. Ava let herself in and gave him a daughterly kiss on the cheek. Gabriel knew better than to comment that she looked like a mess. Her eyes were dark and pinkish, and she obviously hadn't brushed her hair.
"Cup of coffee?"
he asked. She nodded and slumped down at the table.
That,
she said,
would be amazing.
"You okay?"
I stayed up all night doing my part of the end-of-semester marking so I wouldn't have to do it while Adam's around."
"He's not due back until tomorrow,"
Gabriel pointed out. His kitchen faucet had a mode to deliver boiling water, and he used it to fill the cafetiere with his favored blend of Galapagos coffee. A rare treat. Sure, Ava adulterated hers with so much cream and sugar that it was barely recognizable, and a bit of a waste, but he figured it must still be better behind all that than just the instant stuff.
Yeah, but it's his birthday, so I can't sleep.
Ava gave him a little smile that said she knew just how nonsensical that was.
"You're that nervous at seeing him again?"
Gabriel asked, leaning against the counter while the coffee brewed.
For, like, a whole bunch of reasons,
Ava agreed.
Don't worry so much," Gabriel told her fondly. "If you two manage to break the bed or something, I'll fix it."
Dad!
Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Her exclamation had been so guilelessly teenage that it was like a note of pure honesty in the room. There couldn't have been a conscious decision to call him that involved.
"Dad, huh?"
he asked, softly. She'd gone beet red, but she stood up and hugged him.
I'm sorry,
Hey.
He stroked her hair down, as much to get it out of his face as to reassure her.
"You're a daughter to me as well, you know. I couldn't have asked for better."
Ava took the compliment well, sitting down again and tidying herself up a little with a smile as Gabriel depressed the plunger on his cafetiere and served.
She began. I guess now that that's out there, There's something I want you to know.
You sure? Gabriel asked, catching her nervousness. Ava swallowed and nodded.
I guess if I've learned anything these last couple of years, it's to never leave things unsaid.
She shrugged. A newsreel of different emotions rapid-fired across Gabriel's face, but he sat down and said nothing, letting Ava take her time.
I miss my parents, she said, finally. It's so nice to have a parent again. I love you. You took me in. You've been everything I needed, but...
I understand, Gabriel said softly. There's no substitute for the original. Hell, I miss my folks.
No, that's not it.
Ava sighed, then wiped her eyes.
I feel really guilty whenever I think this, but I kind of feel like you've been a better father to me. You're here. You've always been here for Adam, and you've been here for me, too. I hate to say it, but my parents' idea of being good parents was just to buy me stuff. They gave me whatever I asked for, but they didn't really... I don't know.
They gave you what you asked for, which maybe wasn't what you needed.
Gabriel finished.
Papa would never have joked about fixing the bed,
Ava said.
And Mom would have told me off for not brushing my hair. But you asked if I was feeling okay. Stuff like that you do for me and for Adam. You treat us like you're our friend as well as our dad. I miss them, but they treated me more like a doll or a pet or a trophy sometimes.
Gabriel handed her a clean tissue, which she made grateful use of.
You don't need to feel guilty of that, he said.
I know that up here.
Ava tapped her scalp, then bunched a fist between her breasts and knocked on her sternum.
But...
Gabe scooted round the table and hugged her.
It means a lot, he promised. I try, but it's good to know you think I'm doing a good job.
She smiled.
I'm glad I got that out there.
Gabe laughed a little.
Go home and sleep, he suggested. You're going to need it, but you're welcome to come around, join Jess and me for dinner this evening.
I'd like that,
she told him, and stood up.
Go, sleep. Nos vemos.
Date point: 5 years, 11 months, and 1 week after Vancouver. Folktha, Cimbrian. The far reaches. Ava Rios. The passenger jump array had been expanded again during the year of Adam's absence, but they'd kept the glass wall, allowing friends and family to witness the arrivals and departures. There were a lot of them these days. Byron Group employees headed home for Christmas, travelers from Earth visiting Cimbrian for the same. And Adam's face on a nearly unrecognizable body. Ava's jaw threatened to drop. Adam had warned her as best he could about what to expect from the fitness regime he'd been on, but she hadn't been prepared for this. Sure, he'd been fit before leaving and at the end of basic, buff even. But the Adam who caught her gaze and smiled that same winning, puppyish smile at her was getting to the point where the word buff was no longer quite adequate. He was fucking hot. A year of living alone had inevitably resulted in fantasizing and, well, in entertaining herself as best she could, and Ava had assembled a sizable folder on her tablet full of big, strong guys. While knowing that he was going to come back big and strong had almost certainly played a role in shaping her taste that way, Adam would not have looked out of place in that folder. She made a mental note to add some pictures of him to it. His muscles were as firm and dense as teak when they hugged, and he made her feel feather light when he picked her up and spun her around, beaming. God, I missed you. She sighed happily and kissed him.
Your letters just... Wow! They didn't do justice. Look at you.
He looked down and spread his arms. You like? He turned around and Ava had to fight to stop herself from automatically biting her lower lip.
Yeah? She squeaked. I mean, you were pretty before, but...
They became aware that several bystanders were able to overhear them, to judge by the amused glances they were attracting, and shared a bit of a blush. Adam shouldered his bag with a weighty thump. Am I staying with you?
Why wouldn't you be?
I've learned not to make assumptions, he replied, clearly pleased by the response, then looked around. Hey, where's Dad?
He's cooking Thanksgiving dinner. We're going round there in a couple hours.
But Thanksgiving was last month, Adam pointed out.
Yeah, but you missed it, she retorted. And it was your birthday yesterday, so...
Does it work that way?
It does now.
He laughed. That works. Adam Aries. Wow! Okay, guess you're opening the jars tonight, amigo. Adam laughed and hugged his dad gently. Easy, he said, then smiled at Jessica, who was hovering in the background with a slightly stunned expression. Hey, Jess.
Hey, yourself, she replied. Good God, you've changed since I last saw you.
They hugged. Wasn't easy, he told her. Gotta tell you, hearing you and Dad were dating really picked me up when I was having a rough time with the EMT training.
You were struggling with that?
Ava asked, hanging up her jacket and sitting down at Gabriel's dinner table, while Gabriel returned to the kitchen. The whole apartment smelled of turkey and potatoes. Yeah, think I've learned just enough about medicine now to know that I know basically nothing about medicine. It's crazy, he sighed. And for a while there, I just wasn't getting it, you know? My buddy, baseball. You remember baseball? Ava giggled.
Hard to forget.
He laughed. Right, well, he was kicking my ass. He's a total natural. I'm starting to get it now, but for a long while there, getting all that knowledge to stay in my head was damn near impossible. You've got to learn a lot of the academic stuff before you can start working on the practical, you know? You always were more of a hands-on kind of guy, Gabriel noted from the kitchen. Jess nodded, smiling and looking up at the ceiling with an, oh yeah, expression.
You were okay, though?
She asked. I was just frustrated. Adam's chair creaked as he sat down next to Ava. Like, I'd gone through all the pain of Indoc and all that PT and everything, and here I was struggling with what I'd thought was going to be the easy bit. So yeah, the good news from home helped there. Made me feel positive again, and that helped me get past the block. Can't say I'm ever going to be a great medic, but I'm not going to be a bad medic either. So, you approve? Gabe asked, appearing with the plates. Oh, come on, Dad. Of course I do, but you don't need my approval. Jess and Gabe exchanged a happy glance, and both headed into the kitchen.
Guess this is a family Thanksgiving, then,
Ava commented, snuggling up next to Adam. Late though it is, Gabe agreed, reappearing with the roast potatoes. Adam, put those muscles to use, amigo. Bring the turkey through. Adam laughed and did so, retrieving a bird the size of a dog from the oven, which he hefted easily on one oven-gloved hand. Where did you get this?
Cimbrian wild turkey, Jess revealed. They're part of the ecosystem reconstruction.
No shit. What else is out there?
Bobcats, bats, mice, eels, eagles. Ava smiled. From what Haley Tisdale was telling me, they're throwing a whole bunch of different species into the mix and letting natural selection do the rest. They're talking about deer and wolves, too, Jess added. It's not all going perfectly right. I heard the eagles, especially, are struggling. Apparently the low gravity throws off their instincts when they're swooping in on top of something, and they struggle to hunt at first.
How is Haley?
She and Mark, they're both okay. Did I tell you they had a little girl?
Yeah, you did. Hope?
Hope, that's right. Ava nodded. She was going to come back to Folktha after the birth, but the medical advice was it's probably not good for a kid to live in low gravity until at least their second growth spurt, which is, 10 or 11 years? And even then...
Right, Adam nodded.
So they're living in London nowadays, working from the Reclamation Project. Something about GMO plants that are better suited to Cimbrian soil, gravity, and sunlight.
Gabe set down the last of the gravy, vegetables, and sauces and glanced around the table, looking happier and less stressed than Adam could remember seeing him in a long time. So, Thanksgiving. It's been a rough and crazy few years, and, I can't remember the last time we actually did this. I just wanted you to know how thankful I am to have the three of you in my life. Jess smiled and murmured a, "Hear, hear," Gabe and Ava exchanged glances and bowed their heads in prayer. Jess just put her elbow on the table and her chin in her hand, watching them with a faint smile. Adam thought. It was a skill he hadn't been given much opportunity to practice. Constant PT, constant education, interspersed only with meals, sleep, and only a little leisure time, most of which had been taken up by letters and Madden, hadn't made for a contemplative year. He'd learned to enjoy moments, though. And this moment was warm, comfortable. He shut his eyes and let it wash over him. The gentle breathing, the wall clock marking away the seconds, the buzz of the kitchen light and hum of the oven fan, the warmth of Ava sitting next to him, the soft sound of his dad praying under his breath. He opened his eyes when Gabriel murmured an amen and looked up. "So," he asked, "what are the rest of you having?" Date point: Boxing Day. 5 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks after Vancouver. Adam wasn't yet asleep, but it still took him a couple of seconds to register the knock on his door. He sat up a bit. "Ava?" She called through the door.
"Can I come in?"
"Sure." She'd left the hall light on and leaned against the doorframe, backlit by it. And Adam just had to stare. She was wearing one of his t-shirts, a thin white one. The shirt itself wasn't blocking any of the light from behind her, and the varying depth of shadow her body made under it was amazing, sexy, gorgeous. He could just about make out her nipples by the shadows they cast across the fabric, and the shirt was just short enough to create a fascinating dark triangle with her thighs. When he looked up at her face, she was breathing heavily through slightly parted lips. "Past midnight?" he asked. She laughed nervously.
"Happy birthday to me."
"Déjà vu," he observed. She laughed a little again and took a pace forward, loitering at the end of the bed.
"I've been kind of regretting that I chickened out last time," she confessed.
Chickened out? She knelt on the edge of his bed and crawled up it like a predatory cat to kiss him. It was a different kiss to any they'd shared before, a fiercer, more adult one. He was still mind-blanked by it when she grabbed his wrist and guided his hand firmly onto flesh that was so warm it almost felt like she'd burn the skin off his palm. He took the hint and put his free hand on the back of her head, pulling her into the kiss. By the time it came to a natural conclusion, she was pressed right up against him, every warm inch of her, and his roaming hands had discovered that she wasn't wearing so much as a stray thread under that shirt. All of that notwithstanding, though, she was trembling. "You sure you're ready?" he asked.
"I am,"
she promised, and straddled his lap, grinding against him and making him acutely aware of just how little and thin the blanket was, knowing how close which bits of him were to which bits of her. There was a scent in the room he'd never smelled before, and it was having an urgent effect on some very ancient parts of his brain. He could feel every inch of his body pulsing, shaken by a heart that was suddenly hammering away as hard as if he was back in Indoc. Was feeling sick and shaky the right response here? It was all his body seemed to know how to do. For all he wanted to be suave and confident and passionate with her, deep inside he was a knot of anxiety and trepidation. So was she, judging by the way she froze when her hand paused in trailing down his body just short of its destination. "You're scared," he observed. She just smiled weakly and nodded. "We don't have to if you don't," he began.
"I want to,"
she interrupted him. "But you're scared."
"So are you."
He couldn't deny it.
"Do you want to?"
she asked. The honest answer was that every nerve in his body did. Bits of him hurt with wanting to, but he was becoming too paralyzed by the shakes to do more than nod. It seemed to be enough for Ava's purposes. She scooted down his legs, taking the blanket away, and conjured a little square foil pack that she must have smuggled in with her somehow.
"Lie back,"
she whispered. Adam could no more have disobeyed her than he could have willed himself to teleport to Mars. He lay back and shut his eyes, almost hyperventilating as she pulled his pajamas off him. She made a noise, something between a frightened whimper and a wow, and there was a little crinkly noise as she tore open the wrapper of the thing she'd brought with her. "I don't know how to put one of those on," he objected.
"It's okay,"
she promised, and touched him where the contact went through him like an electric shock.
"I do."
After that, while they made plenty of other noises, the only talking they did was in the form of whispered instructions and little 2-word prayers. When he woke in the morning, she was still there. It hadn't been a dream. Most of the morning was spent fielding birthday well-wishes for Ava. Her presents were both more numerous and more impressive than Adam's, but he didn't mind. She could take them with her, after all. It was only after the last of their visitors had gone that either of them were able to discuss what had happened the night before as they were finishing the washing up.
"Did you..."
She cleared her throat.
"Was it... okay?"
He took her hand. "It was kind of awkward," he confessed.
"Yeah."
She nodded agreement.
"I'm sorry."
No, it was great. Maybe we, just need to practice." She thought about that, put her head on one side, put the last fork on the drying rack, and vanished into the room. Ava?" Her shirt flew out of the door.
"So let's practice,"
she called. "Oh, right!" He tripped over his own socks in his rush to pull them off and join her. They practiced. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this one today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. As always, if you could go into the comments down there and like, comment, subscribe. If you're feeling real froggy, go to the Patreon and join over there. You'll get this video. Actually, this particular one will be given to you earlier than it will be to anyone else. Thank you again for watching, and this week, let's see, what do I want to ask you? How many times... what was your favorite childhood toy? That's it. What was your favorite childhood toy? I have mine, but I'm not going to share it until the video goes live. I'll put it in the comments down below, and you guys can see, okay? All right. I love you, as always. I will talk to you later, and I will see you in the next one, guys. All right. Bye! Okay, now I have to stop the recording. The recording must stop.